Hello, it's Ren Presents time. I am your host, Ren, and today we continue with the Belmont Saga, Part 3, Chapter 4, The Road Forsaken. Last week, we saw Paymaster Stenstrom and his staunch band of stellar comrades trying desperately to locate the position of the fallen Demophalon John and her crew, headed up by the stately Lieutenant Gwendolyn. Problem is, according to their scanners and their eyes, there's nothing in this area. It's an empty space. However, they know from using the lantern earlier that there is something big in this area. The lantern saw it plain as day. Unfortunately, the sisters took the lantern back because the author didn't want them to have such a impressive tool at their disposal. Otherwise, we'd be rolling the credits and the story would be over. The author must be a prick in numerous occasions, and I'm going to be a prick in this chapter, unfortunately. So, hypothesizing that the dreaded Drury brothers are in cahoots with these creatures, these as of yet unknown creatures known as the Cronins, they hypothesize that the Drurys must be able to see through the Cronins' illusions, and as they are highly advanced robots, it's obviously some sort of technological remedy that allows them to do this. They have the dead body of innocent Drury. He's got his head screen. He's got his antennae. He's got the little green squares that make up most of his body. And Tara, using her mollied up skills, now not having to worry about demons coming for her, as the sisters said, as long as she serves their fist to his Paymaster Stenstrom, she can molly it up all she wants, and there will be no repercussions. So she's busy rigging up some sort of device using Innocent's parts, hoping to cut through this sea of illusion and find the dreaded Cronin world. They managed to make contact with Lieutenant Gwendolyn on the Demophalon John, and it's not a pleasant thing. She is basically on the edge of insanity. The Cronins, we believe it's the Cronins outside the ship, are pushing her hard, and she is losing a tenuous hold upon reality. Stenstrom does his best to keep her talking, keep her thoughts grounded, but it's slowly not working. She's slowly fading away as Tara struggles to get a fix on their location, and then eventually she finds it just as Gwendolyn says she believes someone's trying to get aboard the ship, and they hear a clanking, and then they see a pair of eyes cross across the screen, and then that's it. So this week, Part 3, Chapter 4, The Road Forsaken, we're going to see what happened to Lieutenant Gwendolyn. I think if you've been paying attention to the story, you know who was out there trying to get in, and that they weren't necessarily unfriendly parties. But this chapter is going to be a little rough. I have to warn you, there's going to be moments of extreme cruelty here. It happens. It happens. But, yeah, it could be a little tough. In any event, let's get to it so that we can get this nastiness out of the way. Part 3, Chapter 4, The Road Forsaken. Gwendolyn could barely understand what was happening In her clouded mind, she saw grappling hands reaching for her throat. She tried fighting back with her family Fadula, but it didn't do any good. She fell back, waiting for it all to end. Some time later, she felt soft hands pulling her up. She felt herself walking, an arm around her shoulder. Boneless she moved, meekly stumbling towards whatever awaited. She felt herself stepping out into space, the maudlin dark of the ship replaced by a sudden gray light. Distantly, she heard her boots thumping unsteadily on hollow wood. A few moments later, she felt herself being seated on a hard, flat bench. She noticed, with eyes heavily lidded with delirium, that a beaded red and green necklace had been placed around her neck. Slowly, things came into focus. She concentrated on the necklace, on the small, polished beads. The red ones appeared to be tumbled stones of some kind, while the green seemed to be dyed wood. She could see the grain of the wood through the dye. Gwendolyn looked up. Standing over her was a small, smiling face, like that of a porcelain doll. A tiny lady looked down on her. She was wearing loose robes, a larger green and gold one over a white one that went down to her knees, tied together at her waist with a green and red belt. She appeared to have thick, dark, brown or possibly black hair that was pulled back out of her face. Long tendrils of hair hung down to her shoulders. Around her neck were a number of necklaces similar to the one around her own. She had remarkable blue eyes and rosy cheeks. Behind her smiling face was a turbid gray sky, overcast with thick clouds. "Who are you?" Gwendolyn asked, shivering. "A friend," she replied. "My name is Lady Alesta, and we are a humble band of Pilgrims of Merian. We're here to take you home. You needn't fear, everything will be all right." The girl leaned down and kissed Gwendolyn on the cheek. What are you doing here?" Gwendolyn asked. "We are here to save all lost souls gone astray. It is our life's work." As she slowly regained her senses, she could see she was sitting in a long wooden boat with sloped sides and a fairly flat bottom. All around her were similarly dressed people in robes, each one attending a member of her crew. They were Merians, the people she often saw in the square, apprentice, spouting their odd religion. A people she never looked at twice. All of her crew appeared out of their heads. Each wore a green and red necklace. In a bumpy fuss, people were disembarking the Demophalon John via one of the forward docking rings, which was open. Gwendolyn could see that a good part of the aft section of the ship was sticking out of the water at a shallow angle. Conning cylinder number 1 looked to be fairly intact, while what she could see of number 2 looked badly damaged. Nearby, she could see a huddled-up Morgan Jeterix under a blanket, again wearing a Merian necklace. "Morgan," she said quietly, and she responded, "Yeah? Is this another illusion?" "No." More and more people filtered out of the ship. Certainly this wooden boat couldn't carry many more. However, it seemed just big enough to seat everyone, no matter how many streamed out of the ship. Soon, the last of the crew came out, and the robed men picked up oars and rowed away from the wreck of the Demophalon John as it bobbed in the water. Mouth open, drooling slightly, Gwendolyn took account of her crew. 58. Wait, she had over 80 crew under her command. My people still on the ship. There's more, many more." Lady Alesta was sad. "We cannot take the dead, my lady. We prayed for their souls and bid them peace." Gwendolyn's addled mind pondered that. She'd lost nearly half her crew. As the boat slowly picked up speed, Gwendolyn thought she heard the roaring of rocketry coming from somewhere behind them. Lady Alesta was sitting next to her and didn't appear concerned by the noise. "Where are we going?" Gwendolyn asked. "Someplace safe. We shall have a large, wholesome meal waiting for you. Are you hungry?" Yes, I'm starving." A tunnel of fog slowly formed from nowhere around the ship, obscuring the sea and the sky. There was an unnatural quiet. "The road comes. Soon you shall be safe." Something happened. The fog abruptly vanished from sight. Lady Alesta, who up to this point had appeared quite calm, suddenly stood up in apparent surprise. She looked around. "The road," the Merians muttered. "What has happened to the road?" A small black vehicle, just barely large enough to house a single person, appeared from nowhere at the prow of the boat. A slender figure wearing red and black robes was seated within. The vessel's power plant thrummed. The figure looked like a black hat to Gwen. The robed Pilgrims of Merian, who had helped her crew onto the boat, reacted with surprise. They chattered in confusion. "What's going on?" she asked. Lady Alesta shook her head and seemed genuinely frightened. I don't know. Our road has been fouled by a power field. We cannot be carried to safety in the presence of power." The person seated in the vessel looked at the Merians and the distressed fleet crew. Morgan lifted her head and locked eyes with the person seated in the vessel. She started speaking. "Knife, knife, knife. I am Knife." "Morgan?" Gwen asked. She'd seen this from Morgan before. Her empathetic tendencies were at work. Morgan continued. "This is so much more difficult than I anticipated. The Kestrels have been at work here, and it is the It Man who must come and cleanse this place. Behold all these people, all about to die. Where I go, the It Man will follow. He will come. He must come. I am sorry. I'm sorry you all are about to die." Morgan screamed. "Where I go, the It Man will follow. He will come and save the scant survivors. He must come. I'm sorry. I'm sorry you're about to die." The black vessel, quickly as it had come, lifted away and vanished. The Merian's boat sat there in the water. A light shined in the distance, illuminating the ship. Alesta appeared relieved. I see, there's the light. Any moment now, we should be safe. All is well, all is well." The light got brighter, and then there was a loud whine. Something was wrong, and Alesta appeared to know it. A gangly vessel flew over the boat at about 1,000 feet, making a terrible racket as it did so. Gwendolyn strained to get a good look at it. Strange, it looked like part of an old Weber-class ship to her. She could read its nameplate. Head on the Hearth. The name, it sounded familiar to her. Spotlights rained down and panned about the water and the aft of the Demophalon John. The Merians murmured in confusion. "No, no," the tillerman said. "Brothers, sisters, have faith! Forsaken! We are forsaken!" someone shouted. "We must have faith! Our faith is our shield!" The Merians chattered in fear. The head spun about. Its searchlights found their boat and settled on it, lighting it up in a blinding cone of white. There were 3 heavy splashes into the water. Several moments later, 3 scrawny men hauled themselves into the Merian's boat, their seedy clothes dripping with water. They looked at the huddled Merians and Demophalon John crew with a wicked gleam. "Well now," one of them said in a thick voice, "looky what we have here." One of the Merian men stood to protect his folk, a scrawny man with apparent strength beyond measure, seized the Merian by the neck. "Oh, what's the matter, Gov? We're not gonna hurt ya." He threw the man down to the deck. One of the other men quickly picked the Merian up by his ankle and dangled him over the side, dunking his head and shoulders into the sea. The Merian waved his arms and struggled. "Seem you lots the ones what been stealing our pets' prey. Caused us a lot of aggravation, you have." The drowning Merian man screamed underwater. His robes fell up over his waist, revealing his breeches. With a laugh, the man lifted him up. "What'd you say?" he said, and then dunked him again, this time holding him down until the man thrashed no more. Laughing, the scrawny man let him go, and his dead body slipped into the water. The vessel overhead came down and settled into the sea. It approached the prow. A hatch opened. "All right, get aboard. We's going to take you someplace nice." They then herded the Merians and the dazed fleet crew into the ship. Lady Alesta was terrified. A fleet crewman, dazed and in shock, fell to the deck. One of the three evil men came up to his side and savagely kicked him. "Get up, ya mama's lad!" They kicked him again. "Get up!" A female Merian knelt down and tried to help the poor crewman. "Oh, looks like she wants to help the miserable wank, does she?" The scrawny man hauled her up and tied them together using a length of rope. The Merian woman wailed at the tightness of her bonds. The evil man struck her across the face. "Shut up!" From their ship, the evil men fetched some ballast and tied the loose end of the rope to it. They then kicked the ballast over the side, the rope rapidly uncoiling. A few seconds later, the Merian and the fleet crewmen were yanked over the side and down and under the waves, never to be seen again. The Merians collectively moaned in misery. The evil men selected 20 of the strongest-looking Merians and crew and made them stay aboard as the others were roughly shuffled into the ship. They stood there on the boat, huddled in a mass. One of the Merians dumbly picked up an oar as if to row away. Gwendolyn saw her boatswain standing there amongst the men, and Lieutenant Cy from the comm. She tried to pull away. She tried to stand with her men. One of the fellows grabbed her by the shoulder and squeezed with crushing strength. "Quit your fussin', missy, and get on the ship." He then picked her up and bodily tossed her through the hatch. The port door closed, and the head on the hearth soared away. Inside, the foul men lined the Merians and crew up and forced them to look out the windows. "Look," they said. "See how he treats 'em." Gwendolyn's face was shoved into the window, as was Lady Alesta's, her eyes filling with tears. "Take a good hard look." Down below, Gwendolyn could see the long, flat shape of the Merian boat with the peppering of men standing on the deck. "Waits for it," one of the men said. Alesta couldn't look. She tried to turn her way. One of the men seized her roughly by the chin. "Look out there, missy. Look, I say. See every bit of it." He made her watch. Beneath the boat, something black rocketed out of the water, splintering it into planks and launching its pieces high into the air. Gwendolyn could see the green specks of the Merian men's robes and the white specks of the fleet crew's uniforms being thrown up into the air and splashing back down. She heard the splashes. She heard the cries of the dying men. The vessel orbited around, lowering a bit. Gwendolyn could see shapes struggling in the water. Men thrashing, men struggling for life. More black shapes shot out of the water, long, black, worm-like, taking the men whole in a wide-open, tooth-filled maw, and then plunging back down in a spray of white water. "Oh yeah, looky that. Look at him go," the man said. Again and again, the black shapes launched out of the water, taking the men, eating them whole. It reminded Gwendolyn of feeding the catfish in the pond near her manor home, she throwing the food in and watching as the fish leapt out of the water to get at it. For the first time in her life, she felt utterly helpless as she watched her men and the Merians who had tried to save them die. "I am the captain. I should be down there defending my men." Nearby, Lady Alesta wept uncontrollably. My brothers, what has become of us? Where is our star? But wait, look! Gwendolyn saw a pocket of 3 Merians and 2 fleet crewmen swimming away from the killing fields. The Merians helping the still-dazed crewmen as best they could. They made their way to a large bit of wreckage from the ship and seemed to be unnoticed as the creatures continued devouring some distance away. They got on the wreckage and tried to paddle with their hands and bits of flotsam. Maybe they could get away and be saved. Please let them be saved. The man holding her chin laughed. Ah, would you look at that? Some of our ducks trying to swim away. He let go of Gwendolyn. Just a moment. The ship banked a little. Please, she prayed. Please. The head banked and a wall of gunfire opened up. She saw the men convulse and a hail of shot, dropping their makeshift paddles. Their rafts splintered into twigs. Geysers of white water shot in the air. They fell into the water and floated face down, the fabric of their robes spreading out around them. The man bellowed. Potted 'em like a bunch of bunny rabbits. Did you see that, Clem? Gwendolyn could take no more. Her men, and those brave Merians dead. She huddled to the floor, holding her stomach, and wept bitterly. A soft hand touched her on the back. It was Morgan Jetterick's, bleary-eyed but coming around. She embraced her. My fault. Oh, my fault, Gwendolyn said. It's not your fault, Gwen. None of this is your fault. One of the men leaned down. Ah, feel rotten for your boys down there, do ya? He said. Huh? His eyes lit up in an evil gleam. Feel bad for yourselves, missies. At least they gots it quick. No such luck for you lot. No, we got something much worse in store for you all. As the people wept, the head bore away from the terrible scene below and disappeared into the waters. And with that, we conclude Part 3, Chapter 4, The Road Forsaken. That was a tough chapter to read. Even though I wrote this, I came up with it. I sometimes wonder if I laid it on too thick in that chapter. I was trying to make the Drury seem implacable and utterly evil and cruel. And sometimes you have to do these things in order to convey that to the audience. But I sometimes feel like I could have treated these people a little better. But it is what it is. The Merians had, as they often do, they had gotten aboard the Demophalon John and were pulling Gwendolyn and her crew out to their mystical boat. And they were successful in doing so. But a lot of Gwen's crew had died in the crash and in the psionic tortures that followed. And the Merians put these little necklaces around their heads, and when they did, Gwen's head started to clear. That all these illusions that she'd been suffering from were clearing out of her head, and she was recovering. And the Merians were on the road was forming around them. They were seconds away from being transported back to their little watching area on the asteroid near Cronin World. But something happened. Knife, and we met Knife earlier. The sisters introduced Knife, and she's supposed to be Stenstrom's enemy, the one that Stenstrom follows, and where she goes, Stenstrom must follow as the sisters' It Man. Knife, directed by the sisters, landed on their ship. And the thing about the Merians, the reason that they always are impoverished and have very meager things is because the arcane items given to them by the star do not work in the presence of power, like a power field, like an engine of some sort. You can't have any power or electricity or anything. Any sort of power creation disrupts the arcane nature of the Star of Merian's gifts. So as the road was forming, Knife's ship lands and her power field disrupts the road and it's dispelled. And Knife is sitting there, and Morgan Jeterix, using her empathetic tendencies, sort of taps into her head and says what's on her mind. And Knife is feeling a bit of remorse for this. She knows that this is her job. She has to make an appearance here, and then Stenstrom will come, and then he will destroy the Kestrels if they are there. But she's looking at all these people, and she knows that a lot of them are going to die. She does grapple with her conscience, but she has made her lot. Her die is cast, and she then disappears. And the Merian's faith that powers these arcane items, these belts, this boat, these necklaces, had wavered because the road was dispelled and they didn't know what was happening. And then the head on the hearth appears and sees them for the first time. And then the Druries come aboard and kill some of their men. They then bring the women and some of the men aboard their ship. And then most of the men they make stay on the ship. And then the Cronins start eating them, basically knocking them out of the water and grabbing them in midair and pulling them down. Very horrific scene to have to watch. A few Merians and crewmen manage to get away from the killing fields, find like a piece of flotsam to serve as a raft, and start trying to paddle away. But the Druries see this and aren't having it, and then mercilessly gun them down. And then the head on the hearth submerges into the water, taking Gwen and Lady Alesta and Morgan Jeterix and the rest of the crew to places unknown. So again, that was a little hard to read. As an author, you're supposed to be able to write about things that you don't necessarily believe in, about things you would never do yourself, but in the crafting of a story, sometimes you write about things that are personally repugnant to you, but that's just part of the muse's job. So we got that one out of the way. Now it's on Paymaster Stenstrom and Tara and Aram to do what they can to rescue both Gwendolyn's crew and the Merians who had come to rescue them. Part 3, Chapter 5, The Swarm, and we will continue on and see where this goes. This chapter is incredibly short, so we'll probably move on to Part 3, Chapter 6, The Star Weeps. So until then, this is Ren Presents. I am your host, Ren. Peace out.